All right, here's another like history-changing piece. Bartok's Concerto for Orchestra. Just the title alone tells you that things are moving. He's written this piece where, as we know in history, in the past, concertos are meant to be for a soloist or at least a small group of soloists and orchestra. So it creates this dialogue between people out front and people behind, the small group versus the large group. But in this case, the entire orchestra is the virtuoso. This is one of the hardest pieces written for full orchestra. I've played it twice, and I've had to practice probably the hardest in my life to play this music. It's incredibly difficult. Bartok is known for his use of polytonality, polyharmony, polyrhythms, anything poly, mashing all these disparate elements up and like everybody kind of fighting against each other. What's also interesting about this piece is it's incredibly personal to Bartok. He wrote this piece when he was terminally ill. He was going to die. He knew he was going to die. He died in 1945, the end of World War II. And so this piece, especially this movement, the interrupted intermezzo, the fourth movement of this concerto, which, by the way, five movements in a concerto, that throws again away all of what we expect from a concerto, which is normally just three movements. He has five. But this fourth movement, the interrupted intermezzo, it quotes another famous piece by a Russian composer named Dmitri Shostakovich. And the other thing it does is it is meant to represent the 1942 invasion of Russia by the Nazis. Right? So think about how rough it must have been to live through Russian occupation, to live through, not Russian occupation, the Nazis occupying Russia, to see the Nazis spreading out like a disease across Europe, and all of the atrocities that come with the Nazis. And so here, this guy is dying, and he's like, I can't believe this is the world that I'm seeing as I'm on the way out. And he writes this incredibly personal and strident and autobiographical piece. It's a great piece. It's one of the hardest pieces written for orchestra. As such, it's not programmed as often as you would think, just because not most orchestras or most orchestras can't perform it. They're just not good enough. Only the top tier orchestras, the New York Philharmonic, the Los Angeles Philharmonic, San Francisco, Chicago, Cleveland, Philadelphia, those big symphonies perform it regularly. And then, of course, the major symphonies of Europe, Berlin, Vienna, Paris, Rome, all of those major cities, they perform, those major orchestras perform this piece regularly. And of course, the rest of the world as well, because it's a famous piece. But so Bartok's Concerto for Orchestra. The other thing that's interesting about Bartok that makes him so personal to me, I love folk music and I love studying folk music, not only just the tunes, but how folk songs interact with daily life in small civilizations, small communities. And Bartok did love the same thing, and he and another composer friend, a guy named Kadai, they went on a grand tour of Romania and the Czech Republic. So basically, the Bohemian countries, which would have been Czechoslovakia, or the Czech Republic today, Romania, the Baltic states, all near the Adriatic and Baltic seas, and they collected basically by following around gypsies all of this Eastern European folk music. And they wrote it all down, right? They didn't have radios, they didn't have phonographs where they could record it. They wrote it all down by hand. And they collected over, I think, 3 or 4 thousand songs and created this massive library of these folk tunes. Now, yeah, they kind of fit in a square peg into a round hole because some of these songs don't quite fit into Western notation, but they did the best they could. And they developed a new science in music called ethnomusicology, the study of ethnic music, cultural music, or what we would call folk music. So, for that reason, again, Bartok is a very near and dear composer to my heart. Hope you enjoy.